We need to run on different frequencies. We have established that. If I have a wireless station, let's call this station 1, and I've got another wireless station here, it's station 2, and they're both trying to communicate with their respective devices. Maybe they're each trying to communicate with an access point. We know that we need to use different frequencies in order to not create interference with one another. And so I might look at station 2 and say, you know what, I'm going to assign a specific frequency to you. So we'll say 2,412 megahertz. This actually exists inside of the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. If we do our math here, we know that 2.4 gigahertz is 2,400 megahertz. That's another way we can say that. So 2412 falls into that 2,400 megahertz range. So either way, I have picked a specific frequency. It's inside 2.4 gigahertz, and now station 2 can communicate, and maybe I choose a different frequency for station 1, whatever that frequency is, so long as it's not 2,412. Maybe it's 2,437, something like that. So 2 different frequencies. In theory, we're in pretty good shape. But here's the problem. What happens if I have something that I can call a point or otherwise narrowband interference? This source of interference, whatever this device is sending wireless signals out in this specific frequency. So it happens to be sending out in 2,412 megahertz as well. Now we might look at that and say, well, odds are low that that would happen, but that doesn't mean that it can't happen. And furthermore, we might actually find that a narrowband source of interference is actually transmitting on a range of frequencies. So maybe this happens to be covering 2400 through 2420. It's just sort of broadcasting a bunch of noise out there, and it's interfering with all of the frequencies inside of this range. So I'm looking at my 2412, and I understand that now we are going to be speaking the same frequency as whatever the source of interference is, which is going to create interference. And that's kind of a big problem. So what can we do about this? Well, what we can do is we can change the nature of our channels. I might have said that, I'm using this channel ID, maybe channel 1 inside of the 2.4 gigahertz space. And if that channel ID happened to line up with a single frequency, then there's nothing much I can do here other than maybe change the channel or change the frequency in its entirety. But the idea here is that this narrowband source of interference is completely knocking out this one frequency that I'm using. In fact, let's just say that rather than sending out a very wide range like that, maybe it's just sending out a few different frequencies. Maybe it's transmitting on, let's say, 2411 through 2413. It just happens to land right around this 2412. So what can we do about this? Well, what we can do is we can actually adopt this concept and broadcast on a range of frequencies ourselves. And so rather than specifically sending out on 2412, I could send out on, let's just say, and I'm not picking this at random, by the way, a 22 megahertz wide channel. So now rather than sending out on one frequency, I vary my frequencies, and I'm going to send out from 2401 through 2423 megahertz. So right there in the middle is still that 2412, but now I've got 11 megahertz to the left, 11 megahertz to the right, and as we can see, I have a much wider range of frequencies that I'm broadcasting at. So let's visualize this a little bit. What we have is we have our range of frequencies here, and I've got, let's just say right here, 2412. So this is my frequency. We know that we've got a source of interference. That source of interference happens to be right around 2412, so it's 2411 to 2413. However, now I am broadcasting from 2401 here to 2423 over on the right, and so I'm actually sending out my signals like this. We can maybe even draw it out as a dome. So I am sending out my signal in such a way that most of the signal is still now going to get through. We are going to have some amount of interference. We're going to lose a little bit of signal right in here because of the interference, but a lot of what I just tried to send out actually made it through without any problems. This is really the concept of a Wi-Fi channel. A channel isn't a single frequency. It's actually a range of frequencies. And these frequencies that I've been picking are not random. This happens to be specifically channel 1 in the 2.4 gigahertz space. It's centered around a center frequency there of 2412, but it actually sends out from 2401 to 2423, and that is indeed a 22 megahertz channel width. In fact, in the Wi-Fi world, we might find, or we're going to find, that in the 2.4 gigahertz space, our channels are 22 megahertz wide, that's 2.4 gigahertz. However, in our 5 and 6 gigahertz bands, these are going to be 20 megahertz channels. And for the most part, when you hear people talk about channels, you're going to hear them referred to as 20 megahertz channels. And the reason for that is simply that, yeah, it's 22 megahertz here, but there's a couple of reasons. First of all, we just tend to round and say this is about 20 megahertz. But second of all, with our modern transmission techniques, we actually only end up using 20 of the 22. So usually you're going to hear it stated that we have 20 megahertz channels that we use inside of our Wi-Fi space. Now, one other thing to be aware of here is that if I'm broadcasting on channel 1, what channel should this other station be broadcasting at? Because we've got several different stations, several different access points in the area. We probably don't want to all be using the same channel. So I might suggest that since I'm using channel 1 here, as we said, that you should use channel 2. The problem is that channel 2 was actually defined like this, in such a way that it actually starts right in the middle of channel 1 and then only has a little bit of non-overlapping space over here. That would be channel 2. The reason for this is because channels are well, not just in the 2.4 gigahertz space, but actually elsewhere as well, they are 5 megahertz apart. And given that they are 20 or 22 megahertz wide, we can't simply go to the next channel up. Now, we might say, well, why did they do that? There's a whole slew of reasons for why channels are defined in this way, but ultimately what we need to do is we need to look for the next non-overlapping channel. The next non-overlapping channel in the 2.4 gigahertz space would actually be channel 6 over here. And it has a center frequency, actually, believe it or not, of what I said over here. Center frequency is 2,437 megahertz, right there in the middle. So it goes 11 megahertz one way, 11 megahertz the other way, and it does not overlap with channel 1. There is a gap in there. And the next non-overlapping channel will be channel 11. So this is why in the 2.4 gigahertz space we see that we want to use channels 1, 6, and 11 because those do not overlap with one another. If for any reason I decided I wanted to use channels, let's say 2 and 8, something like that. 2 and 8, that would be actually non-overlapping. So let's say 2 and 5, something like that. So now we've got channel 2, we've got channel 5, and we're going to find that these channels overlap with one another and they'll cause interference for one another inside of this frequency range. So let's always make sure that we are using this concept of non-overlapping channels. And regardless of whether we're talking about 2.4 gigahertz or 5 or 6 gigahertz, no matter what, we need to make sure that we are abiding by this rule and making sure that we don't actually select channels that create interference with one another.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to click here to subscribe to CBT Nuggets and click the notification bell to make sure that you're aware of every time we post new content. If you're interested in a career in IT or you want to brush up on your IT skills, then swing over to our website, and while you're there, be sure to sign up for a free trial.